Okay, so now we're going to jump into the document object model, and we're going to spend half this video in some slides and trying to give you like a visualization of the DOM, and then I want to jump into some code and we'll look at the window object, which has a child object called the document object. Now, as far as what the DOM is, it is essentially a programming interface for web or HTML elements. We already know we can display the content of web pages using HTML tags with text, and we can style it using CSS. You guys should definitely know that at this point. And the DOM is the structure of the web page that we can interact with, we can interface with using JavaScript. And you can use other languages as well, but for the most part, you're going to be using JavaScript. And it generally includes all the HTML tags, so you have access to those, attributes, the text between tags, those are called text nodes. And when you visualize the DOM, you usually visualize it as like a tree structure, similar to what you see here on the right. And what you see on the right is a tree structure of this web page here, which is very simple. So we just have our HTML tags, head and body tags, we have a div, an H1, a paragraph. So over here, I'm going to talk about window and document in a few minutes. So let's just look at HTML. Now this HTML element here represents this HTML tag in our page structure. Okay, and we'll be able to access that through the document object. And in that HTML tag, we have two children or child tags or elements. We have the head and then we have the body. Now in the head, we have another title element, and in that title element is a text node. So a lot of people, when they start out, a lot of them think that the DOM just refers to the tags, right? The elements. Well, it also refers to text nodes. It also refers to attributes. So you can see in the head tag, we have a meta tag, and that has a character set, a char set attribute on it, which we can easily access and do things to, add to, remove, or whatever. In the body, we have a div, and that div has an attribute on it of ID. And then in the div with the ID of main, we have an H1. That H1 has both an attribute, has a class on it, and it has a text node in it. All right, and then the paragraph has a text node in it as well. So when you look at HTML structure, you should be able to kind of picture this type of thing in your head when you're dealing with the DOM. All right, now I want to just jump into VS Code now and just kind of look at some of this real quick. So in the console, I've already showed you this. If we type in window, it's going to show us that the window object, which is the topmost or the global object in the browser that has a ton of stuff on it, including the document object. And we can, of course, access that from within our code as well. All right, that's going to give us the same thing. And in that window object is the document object. So right here. And that has a bunch of properties and a bunch of helpful methods that we can use as well. So we could do console log window.document, and I'm just going to comment this out. So now you'll see document, and since we did a console log to the document, it's going to just show us the element. If we want to see like the properties and methods and stuff, then we can do a console.dir. And now if we take a look, you can see all this stuff here. And I'm going to go over a lot of the different properties in the next video. Now, I'm just going to show you a couple things, and we're going to touch on all this stuff much more later on, but let's just do a console log here, and we'll say document. Now, we don't have to prefix it with window. You can, because it is on the window object, but since window is the top level object, you don't need to prefix this stuff with window. In fact, you'll very rarely see window.document. So as you can see over here, there's a body property here, and that references the body element. So if I say document.body and save that, it's going to show me the actual element. Okay, so you see the body element, you can see the H1 and the script tag. Some of this stuff is injected by live server, but we can see everything in the body, right? And then there's properties we can use on this, like let's say we just want the HTML in the body, we could use inner HTML. Save that, and now you can see we have an H1 and our script tag. And if we look at the HTML page, that's exactly what's there. If we wanted to get, let's say, just the text, we could use inner text. Save that, and we just get DOM intro. All right, if I were to add something else in here and just put a paragraph with hello, just the text is going to show here. If I go back to using inner HTML, it's going to show the paragraph as well. All right, now typically you don't access elements with direct properties like this because there's methods like get element by ID and query selector that I'm going to show you very soon that helps you target what you want much more easily. But I do want to just show you some of the, I guess, the more difficult ways of doing it first. So let's say we want to get all the links on a page. All right, and I shouldn't say more difficult, but using properties rather than using the methods. So let's create a link here, and I'll just have it go to my site, traversymedia.com, and say Traversy Media for the text. All right, and then let's say I wanted to access all the links. I could say console log and then document, and if we look over here in the properties, there should be a links. You can see there's images to access all the images, and then you also have links. Now, since there's more than one link on the page, what this gives us is something called an HTML collection, which is very similar to an array. You can access each link by index just like you could an array. So let's say document.links, and we'll console log that. In fact, let's comment out this stuff here. So as you can see, I get an HTML collection, and there's a single link in there. It has an index of 0. So if I want to access that, I can simply put brackets just like I would with an array and then put the 0, and there it shows me the link. Okay, and if there was another link, I could use 1 as the index. There's not, so it's going to just be undefined. Now this, for instance, this document.body, this is not read only. I can change that from here. I could say document.body equals, or actually let's say document.body.inner HTML equals, and then we'll just put an H1 in here, and we'll say hello world. All right, so if I go ahead and save that, it's going to replace everything that's in the body with just this H1. Even if we had, you know, a ton of content on the page, if I set the body inner HTML to this H1, it just replaces it. Now I'm going to show you all kinds of methods to insert things where you want, but this is just saying, well, I just want the entire page to show this H1, which is something you're not going to do. Now there's also methods. I'm just going to comment that out. There's also methods on the document object. So one of them, which you don't see very much, is write. So write will actually take whatever you put in here and write it to the browser. So if I say hello from JS and I save, it gets added. Now the reason you don't see this used very much is because there's no targeting. It just basically puts it at the at the end of the file, and it's just not very helpful. But this is a method, right? It's a function. Now there's also methods to select certain elements in the DOM, and those are very, very helpful, and we'll be going over those, you know, in depth. But just to give you an idea, let's go to the HTML and let's wrap, I'm going to wrap all this, the H1 and the link, with an ID of main. Okay, so I have this div with the ID of main, and I'm going to move the H1 and the link inside of that. And let's say I want to select that main ID. So I'm going to just console log document dot, and then the method I want to use is get element by ID. Okay, so we'll say get element by ID, and in here is going to be the ID I want to grab, which is main. If I save that, and you see it grabs that div with the ID of main. Now I can do what I want with that. I could say document dot get element by ID main. I could also put this into a variable. So for instance, const main equals that, and then I could say main dot inner HTML equals, and then we'll put an H1 and we'll say hello from main. Okay, save that, and it's going to replace everything within that div with the ID of main with this H1. Okay, just like I replaced it up here, I replaced the body. This is just replacing this specific element. Okay, and there's even better selectors like query selector where you can select anything you want. So for example, if I wanted to select just the H1, I could say document.query, and don't worry, we're going to go over this much more in depth. So I could say query selector, and let's say I want the ID of main, so I would use the number sign here because you can choose classes or just straight elements, whatever. And then I want the H1. So it's basically like if you were styling this with CSS, you can put any selector in here. And let's say I want to take the inner, we'll do the inner text of that H1, and let's set it to hello. Save that, and now just the H1 gets changed. So this is just a very high level example of some of the things that we can do. All right, so in the next video, I want to look more at some of the properties on this document object.